til å reise? Moskva.
Good morning, Mark.
Good morning. Ja. Ja.
Okay, welcome. And thanks to everyone in the audience for choosing this side event. I know there are several exciting side events today. The Arctic Frontiers is in its last day, but we're still going strong, and we're really following up on the big picture session that was ahead of us. Now, for me, I'm Iselin Stensdal. I'm a researcher at the Fridtjof Nansen Institute. And to me, the topic that we're discussing here now is like the perfect storm. We have all the ingredients. Mineral needs have changed. And they've changed because we have this energy transition because of climate change. And another aspect is that letting China handle most of the mineral extracting and processing, that's been an arrangement that Western countries have been very comfortable with for the last decades. It's been very cost effective, and the environmental consequences have been way over there in China. But now we have a geopolitical changing situation. So, there's uncertainty and risks connected to the mineral supply. And then we need to find alternative sources and alternative supply. In comes the Nordic Arctic. Is this an opportunity? There's certainly minerals here. There's a history of mining. So probably an economic opportunity. But, then there are the indigenous rights holders. We cannot overlook them. And there are environmental consequences. How much are we willing to pay? And of course, there are local communities. Yes. So this side event springs out of a one-year research project that we had at the Fridtjof Nansen Institute last year. And it was in collaboration with Patrick Andersson from the National China Center of the Swedish Institute of International Affairs. We were also joined by Olivia Zhang, who used to work at FNI, but now she's moved to the Arctic Center of University of Lapland. Yes, so for this session, our time together, we will first have Ardem Lamojapov, my colleague, and he will, you can sit, I'm just going to tell everyone. He's going to explain to us, China's dominance. So at least we can leave a little bit more knowledgeable here after this session. And then, so this project, we wanted to share the knowledge with everyone, not just the Ministry of Defense who funded us. So we created a policy brief. And if you're here in the room, you can pick up a policy brief afterwards. If you're following us online, this policy brief will be available at Fridtjof Nansen fni.no on our website. Yes, so Gerir will present some of the key findings in the policy brief. And then we change up the situation a little bit because, rather than us researchers telling you what other people are thinking, we have 4 excellent speakers that cover, different aspects of this conundrum. Yes, and jot down your comments and questions because afterwards, I hope we can have some discussions, the audience and us speakers. Yes, okay, then we can start. Adam, floor is yours.
Thank you. I will talk very briefly about the this is about just the background about the critical minerals. So our project, as Iselin has said, was funded by the Ministry of Defense. And what we did in our project is we looked at Chinese academic publications and different strategies that are available for the management of the different types of risks in from China's perspective in critical minerals. But first, let's see and what are critical minerals actually. So there is no such thing as a inherently critical mineral. Because the definition of the critical mineral is a mineral which is which both is serves as an essential function for industrial production, but also faces significant risks of supply. So, as you can see, different countries have different definitions of mineral criticality, and a significant portion of those overlap. Those include in particular the so-called rare earth elements, which are 17 metals, which are soft and silvery, but also have very unique properties. They're fluorescent, and also they have special conductive properties. They're actually, despite their name, not that rare. They're quite abundant in the Earth's crust. It's just that they are spread in such low concentrations that make their extraction not viable in most circumstances. And those can also be divided into light rare earth elements and heavy rare earth elements. But especially, one can look at neodymium, which is an important rare earth element used in magnet production. So, what is China's position in the supply chains right now? Well, due to historical factors, such as China's willingness to accept negative environmental externalities and the West's willingness to move the industry to China, the PRC is the leading producer of many of the different rare earth elements that are needed for magnet production. So this is these graphs show the leading producers of the four rare earth elements listed above, including neodymium. In 2030, this is a projection, but these projections are pretty accurate because the production takes such a long time to start, so we know that it's pretty much going to look the same. And this is from the EEA. So when it comes to mining, China has about 54% of the mining of these metals. Well, actually, when we move down to the supply chain down the supply chain towards the refining stage, China occupies a much larger portion of the global supply, already at 77%, and this is also due to the fact that China has one of the largest domestic reserves of rare earth elements, but also due to, as I said, the historical economic factors and China's policy. So it is known that Deng Xiaoping, in his time, he said that for China, the rare earth elements will be the future. So the neodymium magnets are especially essential in production of windmills, because when the windmills spin, there are magnets there that create the electromagnetic field, and these magnets are stable or constant magnets, permanent magnets. And they are made out of, as I said, neodymium, iron, and boron. Another supply chain that we also looked at in our report was the EV, electrical vehicles. So, as you know, the electrical vehicles use batteries, and electrical vehicle batteries at this time are usually lithium-ion batteries. So there are two major components within the lithium-ion batteries. It's the cathodes and the anodes. So the positive and the negative electrode. The positive electrode is made out of lithium, nickel, and cobalt, and there is a sort of a sheath that separates the two, and then there is on the other side an anode, which is made out of graphite, which also China is one of the biggest producers of. So as you can see here, this is the graph that shows China's share of the global supply of the different elements used in production of lithium-ion batteries. And as you can also see, the China's share grows as you go from extraction towards refining in the supply chain. So what are the reasons that China has such a position within the critical minerals supply chains? Well, China has had an industrial policy for a long time. As you know, China develops the 5-year plans, and with each 5-year plan, there comes the National Mineral Resources Plan, which is part of the extractive industry plans, which directs the different companies, both state-owned and private, on how they're going to be extracting minerals. Also gives directions to provinces on which minerals are going to be set focus on, and which through different instruments such as production quotas. Also, it is a fact of the global economy that different countries have comparative advantages in different fields, and China happened to have a comparative advantage in critical minerals production, or in the rare earth minerals. So China specialized in this particular field. For example, China had low labor costs and high, as I have said already, high acceptance of environmental externalities. This is actually a picture that I took last December in China, where there is a big sort of exhibition center where they present China's holistic view of the supply chains. How it's like an exhibition center in Shanghai, where they're talking about how China develops the new emerging industries all the way from the bottom up. So what we looked at in our report, as I said, was the 3 types of risks that China faces, that Chinese scholars think that China faces, and those can be divided into market risks, resource risks, and geopolitical risks. So when it comes to market risks, despite the fact that China has quite strong control over the global supply of these different minerals, there is still sort of the sense that supply and demand, unstable supply and demand, provide an instability for China's position. Because, as you know, a couple of years ago, the prices of the critical minerals fell a little bit, and that led to the fact that creation of new projects was less profitable. So events like this can lead to price fluctuations in the market, and also another problem for China is that it is actually dependent on imports for many of its critical minerals. China defines iron as a critical mineral. China is also dependent on an import of iron ore, and iron is an important element that is used in production of lithium-ion batteries. Another area is the rare earth elements, where China uses the policy of stockpiling, where China conserves its own deposits, and instead imports the rare earth elements from outside. And a long-term risk for China is the development of substitutes. Lithium-ion batteries have already been looked at as one possibility where there can be different alternative substitutes to lithium-ion batteries. So calcium batteries, for example, which are quite heavy, but and probably not for electrical vehicles. But in any case, this is a long-term risk for China. Another type of risk is the resource risk, and here the most important one is the depletion of China's domestic deposits. And in response to this, China has actually started conserving, as I said. And finally, last and not least, is the geopolitical risks, which have been rising. As you all maybe have heard, the United States came with the mineral security partnerships a couple of years ago. Another geopolitical risks which we don't often think about is that, there is actually war and conflict that is independent of the West-China rivalry, and sometimes, Myanmar is one of the largest suppliers of rare earth elements to China, and it's where there is a civil war. And another problem is, of course, market concentration, which is that China doesn't want to be too dependent on a single supplier. So China has a lot of different strategies to manage these risks. One of the main ones, which is quite new, in 2020 there was the new export control law, and recently in 2023, I think, there was the State Council order about the export controls. So this is a tool that China can use quite successfully. Also, as I said, stockpiling and creating mineral deposit reserves, diversification of mineral imports, and one of the most important strategies is probably the development of new technologies. So China wants to advance its economy and, of course, move away from a more wasteful creation or production of critical minerals to a waste-less production of critical minerals. I'm already way over time, so thank you so much for me.
Yes, thank you so much, Adam. And our next speaker is Gøril Heggelund. Yes, please.
Hello, everybody, and I'm Gøril Heggelund. I'm a research professor at the Fridtjof Nansen Institute, so colleagues of Erdem and Iselin. And yeah, we had a very good project. We find, that interesting and very timely, it seems, about critical minerals and China's role. And Erdem's presentation gave a really good background and picture of, what China is doing. We have looked at some of the impacts of China's mineral strategies on Western or Nordic countries. And of course, this is a very timely issue, and security and geopolitics loom large in the background, in the horizon. That is why, that the countries are concerned about dependency on China. And a lot of things is boiling in one big pot. I think trade wars, security issues, economics, is all mixed together. And we see some of the results or some of the answers, responses from different countries. I mean, Norway has come up with a Norwegian mineral strategy from 2023. The EU has tariffs imposed on electric vehicles, etc. So there is a big discussion ongoing on security and supply chain dependency on China. And we don't really have any answers to that, but we have tried to look into it a little bit. So one aspect is, of course, the impact of competition between China and the West. And especially we can see it very clearly in, we import modules or, for solar panels, for renewable energy in our countries. I mean, wind power, we also depend a lot on these these modules or these things from components from China. And so there have been some attempts to kind of, I guess, meet this competition somehow. And so we have both the Norwegian company Freyr and also the Swedish Northvolt. But it seems that both of them have had quite big challenges and have not been very successful. It's very difficult to compete with China. China has, as Erdem has explained, I mean, the policies, it has the people, it has capacity, a lot of people working on these issues. And raw materials, we have to import the raw materials from China. And actually these, for instance, Freyr, they moved in the end. I mean, it's a long story. Probably many of you know about the company. It moved to the US in the end, and actually they set up another type of company on solar power and bought a part from a Chinese actually company in the US. So And also Northvolt has also had some problems with the economy, also parts, and I mean some production difficulties, and had to import key materials from China, etc. So China seems to be there anyway. So it's very difficult, or is it even possible to compete with China? I mean, this is something we can discuss afterwards. And we will be reliant on China for the foreseeable future. I mean, that is the reflection we received from some of the companies we spoke to during our project. And if we were told today to stop, using Chinese components, it would not be possible. So that is where we stand. But as Adam also mentioned, some responses, such as the Mineral Security Partnership, was established, and they aim, to keep or to develop a partnership that, to work on developing minerals, maybe in these countries that participate. Many countries are in this partnership, I think 14 countries. So. This is kind of a response to this dependency that countries feel, or not feel, but the reality. It's a response to geopolitical tensions and competition with China. So implementing strategies to try to reduce dependency upon China. Oops. Didn't move. Okay, so just a few words also that create geopolitical uncertainties. It's also the relations. Well, it has been mentioned Russia's war in Ukraine, I think, and China's apparently, seemingly very close relations with Russia, and this kind of relations and geopolitical tensions, they also spill over into the Arctic. And we also have the recent Trump example. He wants to, get into Greenland, and all of these issues, they kind of come together as a result of the geopolitical situation, and that China and Russia, for instance, and also the trade wars with the US, many different issues are coming together. Also China's relations with the EU countries. I mean, China and the EU they have usually had a fairly good relationship, I think. But of course, there is now increasingly, tariffs, and also there is distrust between countries, and also one wants to de-risk. So these are some components that play into the situation with the Western countries. And of course, a very important aspect is security and also defense. And we see this article in The Economist, I think it was this year or last year maybe, China controls the supply of crucial war minerals. So that is also an aspect that comes into play here, that China actually, the many countries are dependent upon critical minerals for military production. And for instance, magnesium, which is an important component, is also dominated by China. 80% of export comes from China. And we also have seen some examples that China has restricted some exports of critical minerals or materials. So for instance, because of the trade war and the sanctions from the US, China is also kind of responding to that by having export controls on certain materials like graphite. And also there was an example of this company Skydio, or Skydio, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's the largest drone maker in the US, and it provides drones to the Ukraine, the war in Ukraine. And China had some export controls on Chinese companies exporting things to this company, because this company had provided materials or products to Taiwan and its national fire agency, apparently. So, and there have been some examples of export controls on gallium, germanium, and others. So, and graphite, which is used in electric vehicle batteries. So there are some examples here, and also Europe. Of course, now Europe is also maybe not equally affected as the trade wars between the US and China, but we also see there's increasing kind of concern in the European Union, and then today actually they're going to launch this compass, I think it's called the compass, which includes, among others, the thoughts or plans to become less dependent upon China with regard to raw materials. So definitely these are some responses to to what the dependency and the risks and the security issues related to critical minerals. But then also, this was also the question or the big topic of this morning's big picture, the cost of security. I mean, the energy transition, it requires certain technology, and components in the technology and that we get from China. So what are we going to do? I mean, both Europe and also including the Nordics, we are trying to pursue some independence from China, and in this, to reach the goals, the climate change, reducing emissions, we need to do this quickly. This was very much so. I mean, the house is on fire. That was used this morning by one of the panelists in the big picture. So what do we do? And it's of course more costly if we're going to develop all these things ourselves, and also there are a lot of issues involved here. I'm sure we'll get into that in the panel. So we don't have an answer, but of course, is there any way we can kind of engage with China on this? And we are, I guess, to a certain extent, but it seems it is becoming more and more crucial, or more and more sort of the emergent problems, to kind of find solutions. And I think this is something that the panel will discuss. And the higher prices are, the cost of security. Are we willing to pay the higher prices in our countries and try to be independent of China? And our analysis we didn't really conclude that clearly, I guess, on whether Norway or Europe could be fully independent from China. It's a question that we need to kind of look into in the future, or not in the future, but in the coming years. So I think I will leave it at that, and looking forward to the panelists to discuss further. Yes, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Geril. Okay, so now we will have a little bit of a change in the scenery in the front. And humans were not designed to sit, so if you're in the audience, feel free to stretch. And I ask the panelists to come up. Okay. It's a long time to stand, so. Is that for? You want me to sit here? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. And Karina, I think I'm gonna start with you, Karina Sommerli. You're the mayor of Luleå. Yes, and Luleå is already important for the mining industry in northern Sweden. So please, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, for you who haven't been to Luleå, you're warm welcome to visit us. We're a city of about 80,000 inhabitants on the coast of Sweden. And we are, as you said, dependent and really cooperating with the minerals. We've had the steel mill for 80 years, and we actually have the harbor called the Iron Ore Harbor, and the railway called the Iron Ore Railway. So what are the industries in our region? Well, we're very, very dependent on the iron mining, copper mining, and we have minerals. Right now, we're in a situation where these industries are growing again, and we are actually seeing a lot of not only the mining, but also the refining. The industries will start in our region. Right now, I'm working with SSAB, Swedish steel company, doing a fossil-free steel industry and making a whole new industry in Luleå. I actually had the groundbreaking with the Minister of Business and Industries the other day in Luleå for LKAB, building a new facility to have rare earth elements and phosphorus taking out of their iron ore mines, actually. We also work with companies as Spanish Fertiberia, and when you do fertilizers, you need minerals. And I must also say Northern Sweden we are very, very strong on energy, and we have plenty of hydrogen projects right now, and many of them who are making investments in our region, then they are making investments where they use a lot of energy and want hydrogen, but also need minerals. And we definitely see the interest from the world on the minerals and resources we have in our region.
Where from the world? Europe or other places?
All around the world. Actually, when the Sweden was the presidency of the European Union 2 years ago, the first meeting was in Kiruna, and then they showed the new finding of rare earth minerals and phosphorus in Kiruna. And the last meeting they had, actually with the State Secretary of the United States, it was in Luleå. So when the world and when Sweden government wants to show the world something, then they come to northern Sweden and they come to Luleå. So we definitely see the interest from other parts of the world.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, can you say a little bit more about the rare earth project?
Yeah, LKAB has for long been living out of the iron ore. They are actually doing iron sponge in the future. They think that's fossil free. But what they also see is that they know that they have had rare earth minerals and also phosphorus in their waste, basically. And now they see that the world needs it and Europe needs it. And maybe we shouldn't be that dependent on China, and maybe we won't always have friends from other parts of the world showing up when we need them. So then we are building a facility, the first in Europe actually, that's starting building in Luleå right now.
Okay, very impressive. But is there any local debate at all regarding, expansion?
Very much. Yeah.
Or-
The people of Luleå and of whole Norrbotten are affected of these changes. I would say that most people are very proud of what's going on and the focus from the world on our city and on our region. So I would say that it's with pride. But you know that there will always be someone affected of the changes. And when you listen here, you realize why people are looking at the world, but not everyone living in Luleå and not everyone living in Norrbotten sees these reports, and they do not understand why it's important to open a new mine in our region, or why it's so important to rebuild our harbor. We actually have a very, very local conflict right now we had to build our harbor about 4 times as big. And just 200 meters away from the harbor, we have people living on an island. And now they have to move out, or they have to have like a wall between the water and their house, and that's not why you live on an island. So we have very, very heavy debates with these people right now who are sad, and they realize that this is good, and they say, like, I understand that you can't move the harbor, but for me, it's still, is it really important? Are these companies for real? Are they really going to do this? So we have a lot of debate about that. And then if you go up, I actually forgot to mention Talga, the Swedish, our Australian actually mining company, opening a mine up in Vittangi in Kiruna municipality and having their plant down in Luleå to make graphite anodes for car batteries. And why that's important, you see that. Sweden is actually one of the countries who has restrictions in our Chinese export on graphite. So that is very, very high important for Sweden to make sure that we have natural graphite. But the ones who live in Vittangi, where they have no unemployment, and they need the land, they use the land, they go skiing, we have reindeer there, they are not that interesting. And their question is like, what's in it for me? I understand, maybe they understand that this is important for the world, for Sweden, for Europe, but what's in it for me? So the conflicts are very, very local, and they are getting louder and louder. And I must say that we as Sweden are not very good at handling them. So we have a lot to learn from other countries on how to deal with this. And we want to do it in a democratic way. We want to make sure, and I'm a local mayor.
Exactly. So how do you mediate these conflicts?
That the wealth stays in our city, and so that we will have a good future here. And it has to be on behalf of, it has to be good for the people living here. So that's actually something we need to look after. And at the same time, I see this changing of the industry and the interest, and I think it's good, and I think that we need to have more industries. I think that we need to have a bigger harbor. I think that we need to go into hydrogen to stop the fossil emissions. And I also think that we need the minerals. But still, I have to make sure that the transition is being made in a way that's good for people living in our area, but
Yes.
also for the nature and other values.
From the big picture, we heard just transition. Do you have any thoughts on that? How do you do the just transition, Lulu?
Well, that's the difficult part, and I think that it's not one solution. Sometimes I travel and talk about this. I was in the German parliament, and then one of the parliamentarians was like, should we do this in this area? And I'm like, I do not believe that someone in Berlin can tell me what's best in Luleå. You actually have to talk to the people who live there, who actually know how they use the land, what they need, how they will be affected, and try to solve the problem with them. But that is much more difficult. And I must say, the companies are always like, well, someone should decide how to do it. You should do it, and if you can't do it, whoops. Okay?
Yeah, fine. These heels.
Good if everyone survives this, this meeting. But companies often want, if I can't tell them how it's going to be done, they want the government to do that. So like someone decide. And that's not how to solve a conflict. You actually have to sit down with the people who are affected and try to find what is important for them. And that, if I go back to our harbor, it's actually different solutions. For someone, it's really important to stay in the yard where you've grown up, and for someone else, that's not important. It's important that you can buy a house in another island. And then you have to make sure that you create the solutions for the ones who are involved, and that's not possible to do on a high level. It has to, often we accelerate the problems bigger and bigger, and we actually need to do it the other way, like sitting down and solving them problem for problem.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Well, you mentioned that the world is not just like Sweden, but the world is getting more interested in Luleå. U.S.-Chinese rivalry. Is that somehow how do you is that affecting Luleå, or how do you sort of?
Well, it doesn't affect us in an everyday life. It affects companies. I mean, it affects Talga as a graphite mining company. But what we definitely see, especially the past 2 weeks, is that, we realized that we should maybe not be dependent on Russia a few years ago, and maybe we need to make sure that Europe is more self-sufficient and resilient, also in our natural minerals and resources. And for the past, we entered NATO a year ago, and we were like, well, now the Americans will help us. And now I don't know, maybe if you ask the Danish Prime Minister, maybe States is not the one she will call when she needs help. And of course we see the big political changes down to our very local decisions.
Okay. Wow, thank you, Camilla. I think we need to move on so that everyone speaks. So, Eirik Larsen, you're the head of Human Rights Unit at the Sami Council. We saw in the big picture as well. So my question for you is is there a place for mining activity in the Nordic Arctic from a Sami point of view? I'm a Norwegian, so I grew up hearing about the conflict of the Alta waterways that goes back to the late 60s, and more recently we had the windmill case in Fosen. It seems like the economic priorities sort of always wins. And yesterday, you, together with the Amnesty International, you launched a report, Just Transition or Green Colonialism, where you're, a report on this topic. So how do you avoid repeating history?
Yeah, I guess history is key here, because we have to have that with us. And from our perspective, it's actually hard to hear someone speak so enthusiastic about mining extraction on Sami land, because for my people it's quite a sad story, and there are mineral extractions on Sami land, and so we have contributed. We still contribute. None of the mine is established with our consent. But I will claim that we have contributed with more than our part, and more than we ever need, and we already have renewable energy on our land. So we are actually self-supplied. I would claim, because as the Sami people, so that's fundamental. We are different people with our own culture, with our own plans for the future, and we are planning to keeping it like that, but sharing the states with the Nordics as well. So if there are available areas, that might be, but at the moment we are not equipped with the legal framework to assess that without any risk. So we have offered some solutions in the report we launched yesterday together with Amnesty International, Amnesty International sections of Sweden, Finland, and Norway, and I guess I will turn back to that later on. But we have a solution on how to have meaningful participation, where we can contribute with solutions that ensure our rights and our self-determination for developing our future. So I just want to go back to the fundamental thing, and that is that we are depending on land. The mayor of Luleå is depending on minerals, but we are depending on land. Our culture is sustained by the land, and our traditional livelihoods is sustained by the land. Without the land, we don't have any future for our culture. Our languages will not survive, and our languages will not survive with industries like mining. So we need our land in order to have a future.
Okay. Yes, very true. But can you explain a little bit more about, you mentioned legal framework and meaningful participation. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, at the moment we have in all the three Nordic states where we live, we have the right to consult, and we are invited to the table to discuss solutions. But consultations alone is not sufficient, because governments they can give their permits after consulting us. So in addition to the right to be seated at the table, we need respect for our rights, and we need to be viewed as right holders, not stakeholders. I would say that the governments and businesses, they are the stakeholders. We are the right holders. Arctic has always been important to us. We are specialized in how to have a good life in Arctic conditions. So what we are asking for is the opportunity to give our free, prior and informed consent, that we freely can participate, that we are informed about all the assessments, and that this happens prior to any decision, so that we are allowed to give our consent. At the moment, many Sami right holders, their experience is that green transition is just a new word for old methods. And they have learned that participating in decision-making processes or dialogue with companies or investors, it will make the process start, and if it starts, it's hard to stop it. So many right holders, they don't dare to actually go into dialogue, because the risk is too high. So that is why we offer the tool, free, prior, and informed consent, which is it's nothing new. It's existing. It's an existing right under international law, and that will enable us to participate meaningfully, and that we can contribute with our knowledge and try to explore if there are any solutions on this in specific projects, if there are areas that are not that important for our livelihoods and so on.
Yes. So often at Arctic conferences and in Arctic context, especially officials, they say something along the lines that, oh, we should listen to indigenous knowledge, or we should include indigenous knowledge. But usually that's where the statement stops. So now that I have you here, so what is the indigenous knowledge advice to this conundrum that we are in with the... Oh, and actually, I don't any longer call it the green transition. I talked to... she was working with biodiversity, and she said, but we're sacrificing biodiversity in the name of renewable energy. So now, personally, I just call it the energy transition, because probably there are consequences. But yeah, that's a side note for me. But do you have any sort of indigenous knowledge advice for us on this energy transition conundrum?
Yeah, in our culture, we all learned not to take more than we actually need. So that is a key part of our culture, and to ask permission from nature if we are going to utilize resources. So consumption is also something that we have to talk more about, and also our knowledge on how to use land and what is important to us. We are not, as I said, we are not given the opportunity to share it with the decision makers, and also to be part of the end discussion when solutions are decided. So it's kind of a paradox that we are speaking about, or the title of this event is China, because at the moment China's minerals, from if I speak, what is the biggest security threat to Sami culture? Yeah, it's land encroachment. That we want to maintain and develop our culture, and we are depending on land. The biggest threat is land encroachments. So we shouldn't be in a situation where China's minerals is kind of a security for indigenous people of the Arctic. It shouldn't be like that. So the biggest threat is actually the permits given by our states. So if you see that in that narrow perspective, of course it's more complicated than that, but that is a perspective I see when we are speaking about the minerals in China.
Okay, yes, thank you. Good point. Thank you, Erik. I think we will move on to Figur and your advisor, right, at Bellona?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so and Bellona is an environmental foundation. So from your perspective, how can we sort of, balance these mineral needs, but also we have the environment? What is the solution? Please tell us.
It wasn't an yes or no question. No, what you said, that we shouldn't take more than we need. That's maybe the biggest challenge of a modern human being, seems to be. And of course, with 8 billion people, or I haven't counted for a while, but around there, we need to make smaller and smaller footsteps to footprints to make our life livable. And I think that in this perspective of China and the West and Russia and the geopolitical part, that's an extra dimension. It's so many dimensions. I mean, as an environmentalist, I've spoken for many years that recycling is one of the answers. So what's the reality? What kind of metal is the most recycled? It's gold, because it's valuable. And the least recycled mineral is the rare earth minerals, because it's hard, it's so and so. And, and I think minerals, everything we say about minerals here today tells us that minerals is very valuable. So if we translate that to another word, it should be costly. It should be expensive, because then what are we using minerals for today? 100 years ago, nobody had a car. Today, if you only have one car in the family, it's then you need one more. And if things become the price that reflects the footprint, then you think twice. Do we really need 2 cars? And I could go on in this manner, but of course, we made some years ago, we made a report on industrial activity in the Arctic, and mining was one of the chapters. And in the Arctic, there is so many extra dimension on top of this normal environmental things, like indigenous people, that the nature is so much more vulnerable. If you take away the topsoil because of the project needs to dig down there and there, you can't just revegetate it simply. It will take 50, 100 years, maybe never. So it's many extra dimension. And I think the Nordic countries, and I speak mostly for Norway, we need to step up of several reasons. One is that we are better to consume minerals than to produce them. Not talking about you. So we need to care for ourselves, to produce what we actually consume. And what can the Nordic industry offer? Yes, we need to have better available technology standards. We need to enhance the better what is called performance, how to operate, and we need to, in a way, artificial intelligence is good, but we need real human intelligence because it's give and take. It should be more costly. It should be harder to develop projects simply because it's the environmental footprint. It should be more recirculation of the materials. And in Norway, the politicians have said the last years that deep sea mining is the answer. Then the green shift is solved.
Yes, that was exactly what I was going to ask you about, because in Norway we had, it's been up for debate, and I think we should mention it in this panel as well. So yes, go on.
Yeah, and that's several governments. I don't know what kind of government we have in Norway exactly now. I hope I don't say something that tears it apart.
I have to check.
But they have always said concerning offshore oil industry, management of the oceans, that it needs to be knowledge-based and stepwise. We don't jump into it, we go bit by bit, and to start offering licenses for deep sea mineral development is the completely opposite. We know more about the surface of the moon than we know about the deep sea that we are talking about, 4,000 meter deep and so on. And if we start that, I mean, probably the life started in this environment, and don't let us stop it there, because if we start, we don't know what we are actually destroying. We don't know enough. And you talked about the Norwegian strategy for mining. A lot of nice words. It's hard to pick them apart because politicians are very good at putting words together, but it's not enough. It's not an operative strategy. So we can because we need to do it on land, because we don't have the time to wait to see if we can do the deep sea mining. Maybe we can do, but maybe in 20 years, not today.
Okay. So I hear you're not against mining at all, but deep sea mining is off limits.
As it stands now, deep sea mining is the baddest idea I've heard about. And mining on land, it's very different from mineral to mineral, what kind of environment it is, how the indigenous people are affected, and so, and what are the motivation for the Nordic countries. I mean, we are in a geopolitical hard times. One of the industries that really needs minerals is the offshore wind industry. I could list up the million of tons of everything from steel, cobalt, concrete, and so on. And the other industry that needs both rare minerals and other minerals is the defense industry. Should we buy it from China? I don't know. Okay. It was a question.
Okay, thank you, Figur. I think we need to move on to you, Mats Kvist Fredriksen. You're the executive director of the Arctic Economic Council. Okay, and he actually got the.
But you can keep the microphone.
Yeah. Okay. Or yeah. We'll
Please
have
do.
some.
Please do.
Yes. So, how important is the mining industry to Arctic economy today?
Well, thank you. And I think this is it's interesting. I've been working with the mining for maybe 15 years now, and I didn't used to see so many people in a room talking about critical raw materials. So it is clearly more important now than most people realized just 10 years ago. And actually, Bellona wrote a report about mining 10 years ago as well, which is actually quite an interesting read to read today. And it is important, and it's growing in importance. We have a challenge, though, that despite it being, critical for security, for the energy transition, even for livelihoods. I mean, people tend to forget that most things in this room has been mined. You know, right now you're walking around a mined world. Even, I mean, I don't own a car. I don't consume very much. I live in a small village in the Arctic, but still everything I walk around has been mined. And I think this is important to remember, that it's not something far away. Like mining impacts our life every single day. And it's really important for some Arctic economies and less important from other Arctic economies. So Greenland, for example, let's take this as an example. 95% of their export today is from seafood. This is really fragile with climate change, with changing of the fish stocks, just volatility. And the Greenlandic government, which, by the way, is 100% indigenous, goes out again and again, says, please come and invest in mining in our land.
Yes.
They're extremely pro-mining, so there's a big potential here. Then we got other places where, like Iceland, there's not a big potential for mining there. Sweden, on the other hand, largest investments in all of Sweden happens in the north, in the mining sector. So it really depends. And talking about the just transition, and the importance, depending on where you look, but the just transition is also, if we stop mining, how many jobs are we losing? And I think that's also what's the alternative we're going to offer? You know, if we say no to green energy, for example, like wind turbines, energy prices will go up a lot, and that means people will leave the region. That's not very just in many way. And then at the same time, we say, by the way, we will also take the mine away from you, which is where you go to work at the moment. So we will move your mine, we will move your energy, and we will increase your energy cost, and we will make more expensive food as well for you, just in case. This is not very just. So the mining opportunity here really provides an opportunity for this just transition, for if there are some sectors that will disappear or go away, the mining opens new opportunities. And this is Arctic frontiers, and I know we're talking about the Nordic. I just want to mention, I think also we have to remember the difference, because Norway is a different case. In the last 40 years, there has only opened one mine. So if you guys are feeling that, hey, this is just the mining industry attacking Norway, you know, the last 40 years, one mine has opened, and it was very south, and it was very recently. So it's not that there's a blank check for business to just develop. There's been a lot more mines closing in the past 40 years than opening. So it's going very, very slow at the moment. So it's extremely important.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and you published, the Arctic Economic Council, you published a report last year.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we published a report in October last year where we tried to say, what can we do to speed up, similar to actually what the Islamic Council say, let's come with recommendations, because it's always good to come with solutions. You know, how can we do this? Because as I heard on the panel, we all know there's a need for mining. Maybe some of us don't want it right in our backyard, or maybe some want it to be further away, but there's a need either from a security, from energy, or simply just because we'll be more people on this planet. I mean, so our starting point from our report was actually, okay, we know we will be 9.7 billion people on this planet in 2050. Today, we have more than 800 people living in poverty. So yes, even though we cut down, I mean, to follow on your point, even though we cut down on consumption in the West, we still got a lot more people, several billion more people, and we also have the 800 million people in poverty that we need to lift out of poverty. And when we lift them out of poverty, they're gonna ask to also drive a Tesla, or they're gonna ask to also have a solar panel in their backyard.
Yeah, Chinese car.
Chinese, they will probably ask for a Chinese car, but they will definitely ask to have the same standard of living as all of us. So either we can say, you know, we want to lift people in poverty to up to the same standard of living as us, and we have to lower our consumption. If we do this, we need a lot more minerals, a lot more. And the WWF came up with a really interesting report a few years ago, a year and a half ago, that says if we recycle all the minerals that we're still producing today, recycle, and if we invest in technology, only 20% of the minerals will be there. So we are not even close. Even if we do a perfect recycling, we will not even be able to, you know, do what we need to do to reach the green transition or the energy transition. So this was the starting point. There'll be more people on this planet. There will be an increasing demand for minerals. We know that we need to get away from China or Democratic Republic of Congo, where we get most of our cobalt. So those of you who have an iPhone, probably is small children in Congo who has been taking out this cobalt rather than in Finland, for example. So how can we speed up the mining in the Arctic? How can we guide policymakers? So we came out with a long study. It's on our website. You can write us as well if you want it. And we went through country by country in the Arctic and said, what's the state of the mining? And as I said, it's very, very different. And then we came up with some recommendation. For example, increased dialogue with local communities, which is obviously. We also said we need to showcase the good examples. I think sometimes we need to talk more positive about the good examples of where we're actually succeeding. I think we're very good at, throwing mud at each other. And the reason why I'm mentioning this, and my final point here, is there was a survey that came out a few years ago in Norway that showed that more young people today wants to work in the oil and gas sector than work in the mining sector. So oil and gas is more attractive for this generation that we call the green, climate-aware generation. They would rather go and work in oil and gas than in mining, even though mining will contribute a lot more to the energy transition than anything else.
Yeah, wow.
So that's why we have to
Food for thought.
inform people.
Well, you mentioned Greenland. So I think it was in 2014 there was this report to the benefit of Greenland.
Yeah.
But they were not very sort of positive when they did their calculations. I mean, essentially you have to dig up all of Greenland in order to make it.
So Greenland, 80% ice, but all along the coast there's a lot of potential. More than 20 of the critical raw materials on the EU list is in Greenland. It was actually one of the drivers for self-governance of Greenland back in 2009. Long history lesson, 1979 they get home rule, 2009 they get the self-rule.
Self-rule, yes.
And self-rule in 2000 was driven by the mining sector. They basically believed there will be a mining bonanza, and they were so happy, and they were like, already start investing the money they didn't have. And then nothing happened, and the report came out in 2014, says to the benefit of Greenland, how can we make sure the mining sector benefits? And what they realize is difficult to mine in the Arctic. It's not, it's not easy. So, and I don't think it will be easier with more regulation and higher cost and so on. Then we will just help China a lot more than we will help Greenland. So they're saying, no, it's very difficult to mine, but we have all the minerals in the Arctic. Fast forward to President Trump offering for this acquisition of Greenland. And what he says is two things. He says it's security with missiles flying over observation, and secondly, mining. Today, there's just one US company investing in Greenland. There's 12 Australian companies, for example. There's a lot more Canadian companies, but only one US. So what we really need now is to use all the attention and get more investments in. And to do this, we also need to invest in infrastructure, because there's no mining is going to take place in very, very remote areas if there's not the infrastructure around it. And this will also benefit the local communities. So the people living there, which is 95% indigenous on Greenland, they're asking for better infrastructure, and they're asking for jobs, which will be mining. So yes, the report in 2014 and the dreams in 2009 scared away some people, and there's a lot of challenges. But now there's new attention, and yeah, I'm hopeful, but it's going to take a long time. I mean, so by this final, there's this people always saying, mining will come tomorrow. From the moment you find the minerals so you can start mine is 16 years. 16 years.
Yes.
The critical raw materials you talked about, rare earth elements, was 25 years until, and then we still don't have the processing. We'll still send it to China. So just like everything we talk about now is a future at least 20 years ahead.
Yeah, and who knows how the world will look
On that happy note.
in 20 years. Okay, thank you. Well, yes, exactly. I think we should have some interaction between the four speakers.
And that is so interesting. I mentioned the groundbreaking of the LKAB plant in Luleå. This appetite they had it since 80, 90 years. They actually used it like 20 years ago, and then it was no economy in it because no one needed it. So it's also like the world is changing, and then we will see effects of that. What we didn't need earlier, we will need in the future. I mean, and we definitely know that new mines is not a quick fix. New industries is not a quick fix either, I must say, but that is like maybe 5 years. Mine is maybe 15, 20 years. So it's very long processes. But still, we have a world that is changing. And as I just agree with everyone here, but it's so complex. I mean, if I look at Luleå, we're about less than 1% of the Swedish population, but we have 7% of the carbon dioxide emissions of Sweden. 7%. It's a lot. And if I add Oxelösund, that's an even smaller municipality, then we're above 10. And then, like, why are we above 10 in 2 out of 290 municipalities? Well, we have steel mills, and they burn coal and cokes. So on the theme, is it a green transition? Well, for me, it's definitely a green transition, because if SSAB will stop burning coal in my whole backyard, because that's what they are doing. And when I go out in the summer, I have to like clean my table, because we have local emissions, but we also have global emissions coming out of Luleå today. Helping them going into green hydrogen, that will be very, very, very green, locally and internationally, globally. But at the same time, well, the minerals are coming from somewhere, and someone will have to move because of the harbor is growing. Someone will have to move when we need a double track on the railway. Someone will have to not be able to use areas, live where they lived, have their factory where they lived, have their reindeer, their culture, their heritage where they lived earlier. So people will be affected. And one of my big criticisms is that I meet so many people thinking this transition is about technique. And they have like 100 people working with the technical solutions. And then they have one who's like a head of public affairs or social contacts. And you're like, and now you're surprised that everyone doesn't love you? Why didn't you have 100 people working with getting to know Eric's neighbor and understand what's really the problem, and making sure you really know what's going on here? But you don't, because you think it's about technique. And it's, yes, the technique is driving the change, but that's half the key. You need the other half to be able to do it for real, and to do it in a way we're proud of.
Good. Sigurd, do you have any questions or comments for your colleagues up here?
Yeah, technique and communication and so. Best practice was the word I forgot earlier, that I think the Nordic countries can contribute. There will be mining in Congo, in Niger, in Nigeria, everywhere. And if we can develop the methods of doing it, I mean, mineral mining is a kind of energy transition. You put in a lot of energy into a project, and you can get minerals out again. How to minimize and enhance this energy use without emission. It's hard, as sometimes the project is very remote. It's impossible to put electricity in there, but and hydrogen, it's going to be so expensive. It must be a very valuable mineral you find there. And the same with chemicals. What kind of chemicals are used, and how are they treated? And the waste can be used. I mean, we are using so much to build everything in a modern urban city. Why can't we use this, that we have used so much energy to tear down? Why can't we use it more to construction purpose and so on? So it's so many aspects that has a very high potential of enhancement, and the Nordic countries should be in front of this footprint reduction act.
Thank you. And Eirik, questions or comments to your fellow panelists?
Yeah, I have a comment to my own
Excellent.
statement.
Go ahead.
I forgot one very important point, that
Yes,
the Sami do not oppose climate solutions. We want to be part of deciding the solutions.
Yes.
And indigenous peoples globally are among the most affected by climate change, and in particular in Arctic. So we have a high interest in finding climate solutions. But the solution is often planned in our front yards. Where we live is not the backyard,
Yeah.
and the wind power plants are on our front yards. So it's kind of a different perspective. And as I also said, that we shouldn't be in a situation where the mineral industry in China is the security or the best solution in short term for the Sami people. We shouldn't either be in a situation where if people move from our area, it could be a quite good solution for us. My ancestors' winter grazing land is in northern part of Sweden, in Kiruna. So that's I have a connection to that land, and we settled down in the Norwegian side almost 200 years ago. And when I traveled through Kiruna, I asked myself a question: why is this city here? Wouldn't it be better without this city? So we shouldn't be in that situation either. That it will be beneficial for the Sami to have people move from Arctic Sapmi. So that's also a kind of different perspective that we have to take into account. I would really like that the Inuit people of the Greenland also could have been here to comment on what has been presented here. But I will leave that, but I would say the Inuit is in a quite different situation because they have self-governance. That they are able to control investors, development projects.
So that's a difference.
And we are asking for that opportunity to be part of the solutions in a meaningful way where we do not risk our own culture and our own future. A final point I want to make now is that the human rights of the indigenous peoples we have actually agreed with the states and all of the indigenous peoples of the world on the minimum standards, and it's reflected in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So we often meet this argument that wouldn't it be better to have mining in your area where you have social rights, labor rights, and so on, instead of the Global South? But we have actually agreed with the Global South on minimum standards. And we have to maintain, and we have obligation to respect the agreement that this is the minimum standards, and if we fail in the Nordics and as the Sami people, we will in the long term make it even worse for the Global South. So that is why we offer the free, prior, and informed consent, and we want to build a platform where we can communicate and have dialogue where we in fact are able to bring some solutions from our
practices.
side.
Yes, okay, wow. Okay, I see we're actually running out of time, but I want to, yes, I see a few hands. Do we have another mic, or do we? Yes, okay. So we can take a few questions. Please state your name and affiliation and pose your question. Yes, there was a lady in the back, but we can start with this gentleman that I saw first. Yes.
Hi, my name is Tony Kaliva. I'm a fellow at the Ted Stevens Center for Arctic Security Studies. Mads, this question is for you, and it's a two-part. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so first question. To what degree would the mining in the Arctic, in the Nordic countries allow them to decouple from China? And then second question, opportunity cost is going to play a large role in any sort of development. I'm coming from Alaska. We just put up a lease for oil drilling in Alaska, which received no bids because it doesn't make sense to develop that. The opportunity cost isn't there, right? As the Arctic melts and the Northern Sea Route becomes more traversable, it'll be cheaper for China to get goods to Europe, especially here to the Nordic countries, which is going to bring down the cost of those minerals and things. So at what point in time does it become so cheap for China to get material here that's no longer worth it? Or would it be worth it to mine here in the Nordic countries?
Thank you. The lady in the back.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'm Caroline and I'm writing a PhD about critical minerals at the NTNU. So I wrote down that Mads mentioned that we only have one mine in Norway.
One new mine opened in 40 years.
Okay, one new mine. But at the same time, our demand will only expand. So I was wondering, how do we take responsibility for this? How do high demand countries take the responsibility for all these critical minerals that we are going to require? Because right now it's coming from Indonesia, from Congo. So yeah, that's my question.
And finally, I think I saw Mark here at the bottom.
Hey, thanks everyone. Mark Lantain, University of Tromsø. It's pretty much an open secret that for the past decade or so, China has engaged in some very ambitious plans relating to high technology. Made in China 2025, dual circulation policies. That requires a great deal of critical minerals, and that certainly explains why China started to securitize its supply chains. So when we're talking about competing with Beijing or engaging Beijing, how do we keep that particular facet in mind? Open question. Thank you.
Open question. I guess Adam and Geril, if you want to chip in too afterwards, then you can. Okay. Well, let's begin with that. I think the first question is to you.
I think I really like that all the questions were about China because I think it's important, like, also to keep focus on this, because the question really goes back to, at the end of the day, do we rather want mining happening on indigenous land in China by indigenous peoples, or would we rather have it happening in the Nordic Arctic? Where do we think is done the most environmentally responsible? Not where we dream and wish that everyone was on the same level, but where do we realistically think that will be done the most responsibly, in Sweden or in Congo? You know, like that's really the question, on China for that matter. Regarding what would be, like, to what extent will it make a difference? Here it's not about becoming completely dependent from China in any way. Like, all the EU government has said we will not be close to that. We are still going to be dependent on more than, I think in their last statement they say more than 60% of our minerals will still come from China. So it's about de-risking. The challenge here, though, is that and I'm talking about Europe, not just the Nordic, is, for example, processing facilities. We don't have that. And the challenge here is that just because you take rare earth elements from Sweden doesn't mean you can use it for other batteries, because it's a different recipe. You need to start all over again. And the challenge here is also China right now, as we heard from Adam, that China is stockpiling. So whenever they want, they can just drop minerals into the market and the prices will go down, and the business case, especially in very expensive Nordic countries, the business case will disappear. So we have a few challenges, you know. So to what extent? To a very small extent, but that doesn't mean we don't have to do it. We have to play the long game. Like, we have been, Europe and the US to some extent, has been extremely good at regulating and very bad at innovating for the past many years in the mining sector. So we have the best regulation in the world and the least mines. Maybe we need to start innovating a little bit more. And one example here is also, I think, is telling that in the US, and this going into Alaska question about not being worth the money, for example, with oil and gas. DOD recently invested in a graphite mine in Alaska, and the fact that DOD goes in now, you know, that's real money, you know, going in, even though the business case might not be there, and that will play a big reasons, I think. So similar to oil and gas, where countries are strategically placing, maybe the business case is not there, but it makes sense. And then your final comment was about the shipyards and the climate change. Yes, this will be in 25, 30 years. The Central Arctic Ocean will be open during the summer period. There will also be a lot more issues to deal with than just getting cheap. It's also even the tariffs, the trade, how will it be there? There's also the Global South to consider in this regard. Maybe it will come from there. So it's very difficult to tell. the only thing I can tell is that the sea route is going to be also difficult to sail on, not easy. So the business case from that, maybe they will be ice-free in 25 years, but maybe we are talking 50 years until it will be proper safe. And then the final question, and I'm really happy that someone actually decides to study this at universities, because very few people. Lars Kollerud from UArctic said he's struggling to find students who wants to study critical raw materials. It's very, very difficult. And the short, catchy answer, and we can talk more afterwards, I'm not stealing everyone's time, is we have to go from, we have right now this NIMBY, not in my backyard. And I think we need to go to WIMBY, why in my backyard? And that goes back to the dialogue that the industry has to have with local people. We need to communicate why should this happen in my front yard or backyard, instead of just saying no. It's a very simple answer, but yeah, for the sake of time.
Yes. And I don't know. Maybe you have the mic, so Eirik, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I guess to give you my final
The power of the
remarks-
mic.
remarks as well. Yeah, that's why I kept it.
Good strategy.
Yeah. So just to summarize my perspective, we have different kind of perspectives, and it's important that we have better processes and that we work on our shared prosperities. Because I don't mean that the people that has moved to Kiruna, a mining city, that should move back south again. We have to find a solution on how we can share our prosperities. I'm still a member of the Sami parliament, but I was a full-time politician a few years ago, and we had annual briefs by the Norwegian security police, and they offered public information, so do not worry. And they explained us that we should be cautious because Chinese and Russian investors might invest on mines on Sami land. And we were kind of surprised by that, because we do not fear Chinese investors, because they cannot get their money running without permits from the states.
Yes.
So yeah, that shows how different perspective we might have. So it's important to speak to each other.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot of barriers. A mining project takes time to start and to get operative. And if this stockpiling is a kind of killing other markets, if it appears, I think there is some tools to avoid that kind of things. One is the European taxonomy, which is about how sustainable management of industry or whatever is done. That's something that we need to use and develop. The other thing is carbon border tax, that when a product is produced in China or wherever, is used by cold energy, then they must pay a tax on top of that. So the competition advance disappear. That's something that we have the tools, but we need more brave politicians, simply. That's I see the clock is still running, actually.
To give the last minute, Karin.
And then over to the politicians. Well, first of all, we, as a politician, you're elected from the people who live in your society, and you need their support. So if there is no one think it's important to ask about the right of Sami people, then that will not be on top of the mind of a politician either. So I need the help of the good voices around me to be able to to ask the right questions. So that is important. If you have an opinion, you have to speak it out loud. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult to be a brave politician. But I also wanted to comment on the costs of making investments here and when is it fruitful or not. What we see, especially in Sweden, the last past the pandemic, I would say, is that for like 50, 60 years, industries has been moving to lower and lower salaries. So they've been following the costs of the people working there. And then the pandemic came, and all of a sudden you didn't get the things from China or from India or from other parts, and then you could sell nothing. And then that's costful.
Yes.
Because then you have no business if you can't sell anything. And then you start to think about, should I really be reliant on someone on the other kind of the world? And on top of that, you have the geopolitical situation. And companies are like, maybe I shouldn't be reliant on someone who tomorrow can decide that we don't like Swedes. Okay. We don't export graphite to you. You're out. And in that situation, the cost of not getting anything is so big that you have to start looking at the cost of making it yourself.
Yes.
Even if it was more expensive than it was 5 years ago when you could buy it cheap. So we will have a more expensive situation.
More expensive situation. Yes. So we ran out of time. We've covered, from the local to the global south, China, Arctic. I hope this 90 minutes was of value to you. Thank you. Oh, and pick up the policy brief on your way out. And thank you to our speakers.